All right, so let's talk some power rankings week 3. If this is your first time watching these, you might be a little bit confused at first, so I gotta give this quick explanation. Obviously, if you've been here before, you're gonna skip ahead into right when I start showing the graphics on the screen. But just so you know how this works real quick, I've created a formula on what tends to matter more. Certain positions matter more than others, and then there's a certain amount of wins you get for placing at a certain spot, tiers 1 through 5 in each of those positions. Now, I could just give my own personal opinions on, what are the top 5 quarterbacks in the league, what are the top 5 offensive lines in the league. Instead, I'm just using Pro Football Focus's grades. It kind of puts it out of my hands a little bit. So if you're wondering, hey, how come this coverage unit is graded, better than that coverage unit? Take it up with PFF. I have nothing to do with that. All I did was create the formula just based on how this stuff typically works using analytics and data. Talked about that to death, so watch one of my previous videos for that. Also, you'll notice kickers are all the same. Too small of a sample size to talk about that. You're going to see some definite overreactions, but that's the point of this, is to, instead of kind of, predicting, it's more so just talking about what we've seen already. Anyways, let's just jump into it. So starting off here, we're going to start off with 1 through 8 right here. And yes, how about those Las Vegas Raiders as the #1 team in football? What a jump, as they were kind of lower last week, but they've had a huge jump. One of the clear jumps they've had was their coverage unit, going up to 3. Also, their receiving unit going up to tier 1, and their quarterback going up to tier 1. Those are the 3 most important positions in football. It's all about passing game in today's NFL. So how well do you get open? How well do you hit the open guys? And how well do you cover? Las Vegas doing all of that very well, and some other stuff, right? Tier 1 pass rush. And while I do kind of, I'm a little bit lower on pass rush than most people, there's still some clear value, especially if you have that elite unit, which so far they have had. So that helps as well. And some other wins scattered about. You like to see the offensive line get better, but the reality is, through 3 weeks, if they continue playing this way, this is a Super Bowl contender. Will they continue playing that way? We'll have to wait and see. Denver Broncos, so you got 2 teams in the same division at the #1 and 2 spot. Denver's looked good. They've had a cupcake schedule. Is that factoring in? Does that make them look better? I do know that does factor into Pro Football Focus's grading system. So the question for me about Denver is, will their receiving core still be tier 1, or will it maybe drop a little bit? Should still be good. I suspect that their defense will still play well, especially their coverage, which we all kind of thought would be the best in football. And then the big question is just Teddy Bridgewater. Played well through 3 weeks, but can he keep this up? Or can he at least keep up close to this? So I expect them to fall to some degree, just given the sort of cupcake schedule they've had so far. But the question is how much, and probably they're still looking like a team that could make the playoffs, but we'll have to see more information, which is kind of what makes this stuff fun. Number 3, the Arizona Cardinals, who are looking good. They have, kind of what to be expected, right? The receiving core may be better than expected going into this season, so that's been a pleasant surprise. And the coverage unit has been the biggest surprise. But again, how much of that is, playing Jacksonville last week could have inflated those numbers a little. But still, Arizona looking very good through 3 weeks. That game isn't as close if there wasn't that kick 6 right there. That also has to be mentioned. Number 4, the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns are starting to look more and more like that team that, I had as winning the Super Bowl. They're getting better, right? They're figuring out how to play better team defense. Obviously, that defense was just, I think that was more on the Bears than it was them, but it still was them. They still did a lot very well. And you have, a really good offensive line, tier 1 O-line, tier 3 quarterback play from Baker, which I kind of expected, but maybe that can improve, especially towards the end of the season. And then the running game is really what's making it work. Tier 1 running with, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, just a deadly duo. Also, with Odell Beckham Jr. back, we could see that receiving core potentially get better. We then have the Rams here, still a top 5 team. They actually kind of dropped a little bit, but not really their win total too much, just kind of other teams got better, I believe. So what happens with the Rams here is they're still looking good. They have this quarterback tier 2 play with tier 2 receiving play, and their defense looking incredible as well. They're one of the teams that may be the most complete team in football. You look at all of those categories where they have, 1 or even 2 wins. They have 5 categories where they have at least 1.9 wins right there. So that's going to get you a lot of wins. Right behind them, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here at 6. Again, Tom Brady and the offensive line looking great. Receiving corps still looking very good. It's the defense that's given trouble so far through a couple of weeks, so that's why they're a little bit lower, but still nearly a 12-win team. Number 7, those Minnesota Vikings on the strength of Tier 1 quarterback Kirk Cousins. Again, I don't agree with all of Pro Football Focus's grades. That's okay. You know, we always think about the ones we disagree with. We never talk about the ones that we agree with, so that makes it look like every list is the worst. But even if you bring him down to like a Tier 3 and take 2 wins off the board, this is still a 9+ win team, which is still a very competent team. And you could also argue that 2 wins should be added onto the board if you get Dalvin Cook back and, you know, playing at a Tier 1 level. So that's all factored in. Defense, not spectacular, but there is at least some talent there. And then how about number 8, the Carolina Panthers with Tier 2 Sam Darnold and Tier 1 coverage. That is kind of the strength of this team right now. So the question is just how well will that hold, right? How well will Darnold and this coverage unit hold? It seems to be good, and that's, you know, I keep being hesitant, and Panthers fans are kind of mad at me for not just saying, no, this is great yet. Well, the issue is that I do think that Darnold is a competent quarterback now, and I do think their coverage is probably really good. The question is just, is their coverage unit the best in football? That's what I'm hesitant to say yes, it is just yet. But it does look very good, so I want to give them credit. They look like a playoff team. I definitely feel that way, but would still like to see some you know, a little bit of a bigger sample size. That's all. Panthers fans, don't at me too much. Like, you guys are looking way better than I thought you would be. All right, so next 8 here, we do have 9 teams that are 11 or more wins according to this list. So that's interesting. The Dallas Cowboys here are here with Dak as a Tier 3 quarterback. If you feel that's underrated, maybe they get more wins right there. So that's really good. Obviously, the strength is the offensive line, who I got criticism for saying was going to be the second best offensive line in football preseason. Well, currently, Pro Football Focus has graded it as the best, so I feel good about that take so far, but still a small sample size, and injuries can pile up there. Receiving, also very good, and their coverage is the biggest surprise of this team. We knew their offense would be great, but their defense actually covering well, that's been a huge difference for this team. Number 10, the Cincinnati Bengals. Big chunk of this is Joe Mixon. He's giving them that 2.5 win chunk you get for being a Tier 1 running back. You know, the whole style of running backs is if you either have an elite back or it's kind of not really worth that much. Well, they, so far, through 3 weeks, have had elite running back play, which has helped them a lot. You know, even with a Tier 4 offensive line and Tier 3 quarterback play and Tier 3 receiving play, they've been able to have a pretty good offense largely with Joe Mixon and, you know, other players have certainly played well, right? Joe Burrow, of course, Jamar Chase, of course. And then again, their surprising defense has played well. So this is set up to be a 10-win team. I think it's not that crazy that this is real. Like, I don't think that this is crazy at all that the Bengals could be a top 10 team. Losing to the Bears, though, really sucks, and that was a game plan loss. So the talent is there for Cincinnati. It's still the coaching that is why I'm kind of a little bit hung up on them. Number 11, it's the Giants, and this is just one of those I don't get it. Pro Football Focus loves Daniel Jones. I think he's played fine this season, but there's no way he's been a top 5 quarterback in the NFL for me this season. That's just how I see it. Again, we can disagree. It's cool. I don't think that they're stupid because I disagree with something, even if I disagree with it strongly. But I still think Jones has played solid. Like, people are kind of talking about the Giants as the worst team in football. I don't see them as that. They are a team that, I mean, they've barely lost 3 games. So they're a team that probably, you know, putting them around 9.5 wins is way too much. But you put Daniel Jones as a Tier 4 quarterback, you shave 3 wins off of that, you put them at a 6-7 win team. That feels a lot more right to me. Number 12, the Kansas City Chiefs. Yes, even at 1-2 are still pretty high, and this does check out. Again, you got to think about the fact that you could argue they could have lost to the Browns. Well, they also could have very easily won those last 2 games. And really, what's crazy about the Chiefs and what's reason to be optimistic if you're a Chiefs fan looking at this is Mahomes has still been a Tier 3 quarterback. And I actually think that that's fine to put him there. I don't think that's crazy for what he's done weeks 1, 2, and 3. Now, is he going to go back up and be a tier 1 quarterback at the end of the season? Yeah. I don't think that I would rather have Daniel Jones than Patrick Mahomes, right? Even through 3 weeks, I don't think that. But through 3 weeks, he hasn't been his typical self. And when he's relied on as much as he is in this team, I think that changes stuff. It's still not a horrible surrounding cast. The offense is loaded. Defense isn't great, but you can win with a not great defense if you have a great offense. They just need to, Mahomes needs to cut out the mistakes. It's that simple. Chiefs will be fine. We all know they will be. Number 13, the Seattle Seahawks, still here despite being 1-2. So a couple of 1-2 teams still relatively high up. And again, it's not just are you winning or losing, but how are you playing in these games and competition, of course. So for the Seahawks, offensive line, not horrible, tier 4. That's kind of what they've been the entire Russell Wilson era, is never the worst in the league, but never good. Wilson hasn't quite played at that tier 1 level we expect from him. He's been tier 2, which, he's relied on a lot in this team to be a tier 1 quarterback. So he kind of needs to step it up a little bit. But receiving core still played very well. And you've gotten some contributions throughout the rest of the team. Number 14, Tennessee. The receiving core just hasn't lived up to the hype so far. You added Julio. You thought with Julio, A.J. Brown, I was a little bit concerned about that third option, but I still felt like you got those number 1 and 2. This should be a great receiving core. It's been a little clunky through 3 weeks. Again, just through 3 weeks, you still have Tannehill, who is the definition of a tier 2 quarterback. You have Derrick Henry, who's the definition of an elite halfback. So you got those two things going for you, and even a little bit of contribution from your defense. Defense played well against Indianapolis, who's not looking like a great team right now, but still, there's some hope here for the Titans to make the playoffs and also be better than what this projected record would show. Number 15, we have the Chargers. Listen, the Chargers are definitely kind of here on the strength of Justin Herbert. That's a big chunk of their, team right now. Herbert being that tier 1 quarterback has really helped them, and he's looked awesome through 3 weeks. He really has. He's earned this tier 1 rating. I know that he's so young. We don't expect him to be this good. The numbers, again, the overall point totals maybe haven't been as high, but you can't look at that stuff. You got to watch the game, and he's been really good, and the receiving core has been good. I'm a little surprised the offensive line was tier 5. I didn't think it was that bad, but again, I haven't studied each of their linemen the way that PFF has, so I'll take their word for it. And the defense, I think a lot of people are a little bit surprised by this, that it's going to be lower, but I think what's important to factor in is just the way that Brandon Staley has run this defense. He gets more value out of the talent. This is just evaluating talent. It's not evaluating coaching. So with the coaching, they're actually probably performing better than just below a 9-win team. Going on to number 16 now with the Packers. The Packers are going to be still lower just because of that horrible week 1 performance, right? It's going to take them some time to overcome that bad performance, but they had a good week. Rodgers has continuously looked good these past 2 weeks, which has brought him back up to tier 3 from that, nearly the worst quarterback in the league performance in week 1. Maybe he even was in week 1. So that's improving. Offensive line's been good all season. Receiving core has been solid. Still feel like they could use another option, but that's been beaten to death at this point. We all get it. And defense has contributed as well. So a lot of stuff to like about this Packers team, and I expect them to continue moving in the right direction and getting, climbing the power rankings. All right, next 8 here. The New England Patriots still in that mediocre range. They haven't dropped too much. They still have tier 3 quarterback from Mac Jones. Solid offensive line play, even if it wasn't spectacular last week. Running game dropping from 2.5 to 6.3. That hurts. They had that tier 1 running back play for a little bit, but, has not continued through 3 weeks, which we probably expected it to not, but there was maybe that hope it could. Coverage is still playing well. There's still a lot to like about this team. I think losing to the Saints, who, we'll talk about them. According to this list, they're basically, very similar teams. But what's interesting about the Saints, we'll talk about them both together, is with the New Orleans Saints, you have Jameis Winston, who is currently at tier 5 quarterback play. But one of the things about Winston is even when he doesn't play spectacular like he didn't against the Patriots, still some of his weird wonkiness will kind of work out, right? Like him falling down and it still is a touchdown. So he's added value even if it's not necessarily him playing well, which is kind of just the weirdness of Winston. Obviously, we don't expect that to continue, but sometimes you basically with Winston, he flips a coin, and sometimes it lands on the wrong side for you. That's what happened with the Patriots a little bit. Also, the Saints, Alvin Kamara, such an important part of this team. I mean, that just matters so much, and they've been covering well. So, Patriots and Saints both have opportunities to improve. I kind of like where the Patriots are at. That feels right for me, and I think the Saints could improve if Winston doesn't play, Winston starts playing better, which Tier 5 does feel a little harsh for me, even if I don't think he's a star. At least Tier 4, give him an extra win. Number 19, the Philadelphia Eagles. I saw a lot of people not impressed with the Eagles on the Monday night game. But, there's still some stuff to like here with the Eagles. I still think Hurts being like a Tier 3 quarterback, that checks out to me. That's not a superstar, but like a guy who can play at least, that's kind of what I said when I was sort of buying stock on Hurts. The receiving core's, again, been solid. Offensive line's been good. So this is why the offense has been better than we've seen. Defense, though, took a big hit. That front seven did not look great against the Cowboys. Was that the Cowboys or was that the Eagles? That's why we need more sample size before we really start, crowning or bashing some of these teams. Number 20, the Buffalo Bills. PFF's still very low on them, although they've climbed a lot, right? Last week, I think they were one of the worst teams in football using the Pro Football Focus grades. This time, they've climbed a lot higher. Coverage being Tier 1 kind of checks out. They played really good defense. And then Josh Allen being Tier 3, he will get better. Offensive line being Tier 5. That'll be better. Receiving core being Tier 4, that'll be better. So you've got maybe a few wins just right there, maybe 3 or 4 wins right there, which will put you into a playoff spot, which feels appropriate for Buffalo. Number 21, the Baltimore Ravens. And again, one interesting thing about the Ravens is just kind of how Lamar Jackson is kind of one of the weird exceptions. He kind of makes this system a little bit more difficult because his running game right now hasn't been good enough to put the Ravens in Tier 1 rushing, but it should be, right? So we know that there's those 2 extra wins you get from having a Tier 1 running game, always with Lamar. So a Tier 1 runner with a Tier 3 quarterback, which is kind of maybe how you would put Lamar Jackson as, that adds a lot more wins, and that would give them, 2 more wins. You're looking at, just shy of 10 already. There isn't a ton else. The receiving corps played as good as Lamar has ever had a receiving core play for him, so that's helped him in the passing game a lot, for sure. Defense kind of been a bit underwhelming so far through 3 weeks, but a lot of that is injuries as well. So number 22, the team that the Ravens beat the last time they went to the Super Bowl, the San Francisco 49ers, who, O-line's playing well, quarterback isn't really. I thought Garoppolo was fine, but he's, Tier 4. I would say maybe you could say he's Tier 3, but it's not like spectacular. So you would hope to see that improve. I think it will as well. Receiving core has been fine. Their defense has been kind of iffy, according to Pro Football Focus. Not a ton of great grades. I don't really disagree with anything on here, but the question is, will the San Francisco 49ers continue to overperform some of this stuff, or are we sleeping on something? Are we sleeping on the quarterback? Are we sleeping on the running game? Because, again, you do have that Shanahan scheme. Teams are trying to stop it. They've had success doing that, but they've been using resources to try and stop it, which maybe is why you could argue there's more value there, I guess, because I feel like calling the Niners a 7.5 win team feels too low, but it's like, where is the clear issue there? Maybe their pass rush could be considered better, their coverage could be considered better, so maybe it's the defense that's graded a little bit lower than we probably expect. Number 23, the Miami Dolphins, who, PFF was really impressed with Brissett's game. I know Brissett's log line was not very good, his stats, but people pay way too much attention to those stats, just whatever it says there. Imagine if we did that in baseball, right? Where we said, oh, this player went 1 for 4, he sucks, or this guy went 3 for 4, he's a god. Like, of course you can't just look at that in such a small sample size. I thought he played well. He was fine. It was tough to get stuff going, but part of that might just be the good Raiders defense. I'd probably put him in Tier 4 right there, so I'm surprised that it's Tier 3. Plus, I believe they were Tier 5 before this, so we really raised them up a little bit. So that's nice to see, at least, that Brissett could be good. There's just not a ton else to like. Still Tier 5 offensive line. Receiving core is down to Tier 5, which is a big disappointment because they put a lot of resources into that. Coverage is even down a little bit, but I suspect that will bounce back and be Tier 1. But as a whole, it's just been a disappointing season for Dolphins fans who they felt like me saying they wouldn't make the playoffs was very unfair to them and that they're probably going to be like a playoff team. So definitely disappointing, and it always sucks. Trust me, I've been through this as a Tampa Bay fan of those years that we thought, oh no, this will be the year. Jameis Winston's going to find it. We're going to make the playoffs, and then we had a disappointing season. It sucks. It's probably the worst thing you can have as a football fan is expectations that are not met. Hopefully they can turn it around, and there is still hope there that the receiving core can play better. If Brissett continues to be a tier 3 quarterback and the receiving core can play better, well, that could put you into a fringe playoff spot. So it's not over. I'm not writing the eulogy 3 weeks into the season, but that's what has to happen, really, I would say. And then coverage gets a little better. Boom, you're a playoff team. Number 24, the Atlanta Falcons, who played the least watched game of the season against the Giants, I think. But there's been some improvements. Matt Ryan has been a steady tier 4 quarterback, which is definitely a disappointment from what we expect from him, I would say. The receiving core played better, finally. Defense still looking rough. But as a whole, 5.92 wins. It's not a good team, but at least you're on this panel instead of on the next panel. So good job, Atlanta, I suppose. All right, final panel here. The Houston Texans here. Hey, how about Houston? 7 teams below them. I think that's 7 more than we all expected to be below them. So you have the Houston Texans here who are, 5.5 wins. There's stuff to like about this team. The receiving core is playing all right. The quarterback play is tier 4. A lot of that was Tyrod Taylor, not Davis Mills, who some people think is a god. He is, but that's mostly just because of his neck. But again, it's the kind of thing that we felt like there's a chance that could happen with the Texans, is that just the fact that they have a lot of veterans and a lot of guys who can play, they would at least become a competent team, and that's what they've been, a competent team. Still not a great one, though. Number 26, the Washington football team, also known as the Balls. Been a disappointing season for them. I have a typo on my panel. I'm just looking at that right now. It's over 4.51 wins. I know that, but I accidentally deleted a couple of the numbers. So they're somewhere in that range. You can do the math yourself if you want to figure out the exact total. But I mean, tier 5 quarterback play sucks. And the real shocker to me is that tier 5 coverage unit. Pass rush has actually played well this past week, but the coverage is just that's just a mess right there, and you can't win if you can't cover. So we thought this was going to be a tier 1 coverage unit that would put them up to close to 8 wins now, and then you get another win with Ryan Fitzpatrick. Maybe the receiving core plays better. That's why I thought they could be a playoff team. There's just been a ton of disappointments, specifically to coverage, though. That's been the number 1 disappointment. 27, the Jacksonville Jaguars. They continue to have tier 1 running back play. I mean, James Robinson's one of the best things this team has going for them, and also Lawrence is making improvements, right? He's not going to be a tier 1 quarterback week 1, even though that's what some people wanted him to be, but I do think I saw some things that I liked from Lawrence. I see him getting better, improving in certain aspects. It's just not a very talented team. The receiving core being tier 5, that hurts a lot. 28, the Chicago Bears. This is again, the Bears are kind of a weird team. Their defense can be solid. The defense is okay. I actually think the defense is better than what PFF gives them credit for. I think the defense is actually pretty good, but that's pretty much it. I mean, they have currently a tier 4 quarterback play. That's because of Dalton. That's not because of Fields. It was rough, right? A lot of sacks. Offensive line, tier 4, not tier 5, which I got to say, I agree with. I do have to say I agree with it. I think the sacks I'm not even putting a lot of them on Fields. Some of them are on Fields. People keep arguing, is it the line or is it the quarterback? To me, the number 1 thing is the receiving core. Guys got to get open. When you have a quarterback who holds onto the ball a little bit longer and not the best offensive line, well, yeah, I mean, guys are going to be able to, get to the quarterback if you're not throwing the ball quickly, which Fields shouldn't have because guys weren't getting open. So just a complete mess on that offensive side of the ball. And in today's NFL, I don't care if your defense is perfect, you're not going to win games when you're only getting one passing yard. Just not going to happen. The Detroit Lions here at number 30. There's stuff to like. Jared Goff's solid. Offensive line's played well. I think it's maybe even underrated from what PFF says. Defense still not playing perfect, but they did nearly beat the Baltimore Ravens. Now, if Marquise Brown could catch, I think that they don't come close to beating the Ravens, but still, it took a miracle for them to end up losing. So there's stuff to like, but the Lions are they're frisky losers. That's kind of what they are. They're not going to win a lot of games, but they'll probably be competitive in more games than we expect. Number 31, the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have just been a It's such a disappointment so far through 3 weeks, especially after winning week 1 against a good team. We're all thinking, hey man, this coverage unit's looking better. Well, that's out the window. Apparently with just one good week and Allen missed some throws. Pass rush still getting tier 5 credit, and run defense still getting tier 1 credit, and run defense still getting tier 1 credit, but I just don't value those things as much. And then the offensive line's playing well, but when you have a tier 5 quarterback play, tier 5 receiving play, tier 5 running game, tier 5 coverage, I don't have a lot of hope for you. So I will say I think that stuff will improve. I don't think they'll continuously have tier 5 receiving core play or tier 5 coverage. I think Big Ben, I'm holding out hope a little bit he can get better, but if not, this is a team that could potentially contend for, getting a quarterback with a top 10 pick next year. I don't think that's crazy if they continue playing how they played through 3 weeks. And at number 32, of course, the Jets they've just been tough. It's been tough to watch. Continuously, offensive line's actually been solid. Like, people keep blaming the offensive line for everything. For Lawrence, for Fields, and for Wilson, it's always been the offensive line. Actually, you look at all those guys, none of them have tier 5 offensive lines, but they do all have tier 5 receiving cores. In fact, they all have the 3 worst receiving cores in football via PFF. So that's a big issue. I mean, there's just no real help outside of the offensive line for any of these quarterbacks, really, but especially for Wilson. And then you add on the defense has been okay. There's been a couple spots there, but it's still not great. I think people are overrating the defense. Like, listen, when you're playing teams who are running out the clock the entire second half, you're going to look a little bit better than you actually are. 2.51 wins. It'll get better, I think. I think we'll see some flashes from Wilson. I thought he took some baby steps in that week 3 game. But the receiving core, I don't know if it's going to get better. And that's a huge issue. It's hard to win games with a bad receiving core. And we're going to see some rough games with Wilson. We are. So, yeah, that's the power rankings. Those are my thoughts on the power rankings and the whole algorithm. This stuff is fun. I'm glad that, the reception was pretty positive so far through 2 weeks. So that's cool to see. I'm glad you guys enjoy this because I enjoy making it. So, yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. And, of course, as always, thanks for watching.